Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Delivering Insights That Matter. My name is Laura and I'll be your moderator today. We have a fantastic session ready for you, so I'll jump right into it. A few quick housekeeping items before we begin. If you have any technical issues, please send me a question in the question pane and I'll try to resolve it on my end if I can. You can submit questions throughout the webinar by typing them into the questions pane in your control panel. We'll collect the questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Also, a recorded version of this webinar will be available after the event concludes. Today, as we kick off a three-part CMO Thrive series, over the next 3 webinar sessions, we're going to walk through critical foundations and details that help you prove marketing's contribution to revenue. Today is part 1, and we'll be identifying key revenue-generating metrics, why they matter, what to track in Marketo today, and we'll walk through some common roadblocks we all come across on the journey. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and introduce today's speakers. Andrew Hull is president and founder of Elixiter, a team of 45-plus Marketo experts focused on best practice implementation and execution in the Marketo platform. Andrew's a veteran of the software as a service space. He served in a wide range of positions at Right Now Technologies, which was acquired by Oracle, overseeing product messaging, web properties, marketing automation, events, and marketing analytics. Also with us today is Kate Gossens. Kate leads the business intelligence team here at Elixiter. She has experience in sales operations and FP&A analyst roles, most recently with Aptiv. With a decade-plus of experience, Kate understands the sales process through every stage, and more importantly, knows how to report and advise based on those numbers. We're really excited to have these presenters with us today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andrew. Andrew, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the webinar today. I'd like to start off with just a few comments before we pass it on to Kate. You know, as B2B marketers, we all live in a world that requires proof of our impact to revenue, and this is something that has really fundamentally changed over the last decade for all of us as marketers. And so we all desire to track, analyze, and improve our marketing performance, and this is and has been fueling this hyper-growth in the MarTech and the ad tech solution space. And it's really this technology is the only way we can really get the detail we need as marketers today. Unfortunately, and all of you are experiencing this, the speed of change and the complexity of all these MarTech and ad tech solutions you know, really puts you in a near impossible position to understand, leverage, and operate all these different technologies to their full potential, while also overseeing all the other non-technical aspects of your role. And I think this really is the challenge for all of us as marketers today. And so everything we can do collectively as a marketing discipline to make this easier and get to the detail and the analytics and the proof to impact together and do it more quickly helps all of us. And so this webinar is really going to help you zero in on those insights that matter. And I really hope at the end of this 3-part series, you and your marketing team will be able to leverage the Marketo platform to help you along your way. The big question here is, are you getting the marketing insights that matter? And chances are, if you're joining this webinar, you may be getting one or many of the marketing metrics, but there's probably some that you're not quite there on, or many, depending on where you're at on that maturity curve of getting to that tie between marketing and revenue. And so as you're looking down these check boxes here, most of these questions are agnostic of technology, by the way. They're questions that you go through in your annual or quarterly planning process, right? What defines marketing success for your organization? What goals have been outlined for the year? Are those goals, those specific tactical goals, aligned to your business objectives? And how are you and your team going to go achieve these goals? those are all the right questions to be asking, and each one of us in our respective organizations starts the year and is trying to achieve our specific industry or company goals relative to these questions. The last one, though, is really interesting, is do you have the right tools in place to reach those goals? And as I mentioned earlier, the real challenge in today's world is that we have to rely on all these digital platforms to collect and get the right information, and now the challenge is how do we instrument that so we get the right metrics in front of us. And so as this screen renders for you, these are the dashboard level items that we encourage our clients to go after. So as we interact with CMOs and VPs, directors and managers in marketing, we've noticed that these questions really need to get answered now versus 5 or 10 years ago, when it may have been okay to answer questions like the number of leads or click rates or open rates or even MQLs, because that was as far as many marketing organizations even had the capability to track. Well, as I've mentioned, the world has changed, and you can track down to items like the top left, pipeline influenced by marketing, or revenue influenced by marketing. These are much, much deeper into the sales cycle, all the way down to the closed deal. And honestly, if CMOs and marketing executives can confidently answer those sorts of questions, then you really are thriving, not just surviving in today's marketing world. And so that's our challenge as we work with each one of our clients, is to help them thrive and not just simply survive. We want to use platforms like Marketo to really help you meet and exceed your goals. And so we're going to come back to this slide after Kate goes into more details and pause on it again before we close out the presentation and prepare for webinars number 2 and 3. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Kate, and she is going to dig in a little deeper on all these.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Let's talk about the key revenue generating metrics. So we're going to cover our top 8 metrics. You saw a quick snapshot of those in that dashboard in the previous slide. And in the upcoming webinars, you'll be able to see even more deep dive into each of those. So let's talk about the first 4. So as a marketing leader, you need metrics that focus on proving your contribution to revenue. As you see the first 2, pipeline influenced by marketing and revenue influenced by marketing, those are our first 2 we want to start with, because one, they're the most important, but also they're ones that are sometimes the hardest to track. So starting with pipeline influenced by marketing. You may be already jumping to revenue, but I do want to stop for a second and just focus on pipeline. Pipeline is important for many reasons: for forecasting, tracking deal velocity, probability of achieving targets. It also helps to identify what's working and not working. And most of all, you need that pipeline. That way you can see from the pipeline what you're actually contributing to revenue, which leads us to the next one. Revenue influenced by marketing. So marketing needs to be able to show all their hard work and measure those marketing strategies, and revenue is really the number 1 metric to be able to say, hey, we've closed X number of revenue, and marketing has influenced X number, which is the best part of this metric really, is understanding the impact on the business. So looking at those first 2, pipeline influenced by marketing and revenue influenced by marketing, we're looking at the dollars. But now we need to check and look at, of the top channels and programs, we need to understand which of those channels and programs are impacting these numbers. So one of the main things that we like to focus on is looking at our channels and programs, identifying which of those has had the most impact on pipeline and revenue, but also realizing that what you're seeing has had the most impact on pipeline may be different than what you see on those that have the most impact on revenue. And that's okay. It's just important to understand the differences and then understand where you should focus your time. And this is going to be really important if you're planning for the next year or trying to focus on what you're going to spend. The last metric is the percent of total revenue won influenced by marketing. I know in the first two we talked about the dollars that marketing has influenced, but we also want to look at it from a total sales closed view. What percent of that did marketing impact? And this is really important to review not just each quarter, but every quarter going back to whatever baseline or wherever you may have started. And if you don't have these metrics today, that's okay. But if you can start with a baseline and then increase those numbers over time, that's really going to be beneficial for you moving forward. The next four metrics we're going to cover really focus on the buying cycle. So we want to focus on metrics that identify top channels and programs that optimize the buying cycle. We're going to start with the first one, which is top channel sourcing, pipeline, and revenue generating records. So when we're talking about first touch attribution, this is really what we are mostly focused on. You want to start analyzing which channels are bringing in the most quality leads so you can focus your efforts on those top sourcing channels. You may today already be looking at this to look at your number of records that you're sourcing each month, each quarter, and then looking at those top sources. But the next question you want to answer is, of those channels, which is actually sourcing pipeline and revenue generating records? And that's why this is really one of our first ones we want to look at when we're looking at the buying cycle. The next one is top channels converting to milestones. So when we look at this specific metric, we're really focused on that last touch metric. We want to analyze which channels and programs are pushing records to a key milestone within your buying cycle. And it could be multiple milestones. For example, your team may want to focus on which programs a record had engaged with prior to an opportunity being created. This is important so you can focus on those programs that are really pushing those records to that opportunity stage in your buying cycle. But you can also focus on other stages that are key milestones and then look at those programs. But identifying which programs are really pushing records to a specific milestone is very important. The next one is conversion rates from acquisition to customer. So as you start tracking conversion rates and looking at your buying cycle, you're going to want to know what those rates are between each stage. And you're going to want to see where records may be getting stuck or where you may want to make adjustments so that you can track conversion rates not just from one stage but from multiple stages. And this is going to be very important because it doesn't necessarily only want to focus on two main stages, but you want to see how records are coming in and then how they move on to become a customer. And the next one, which is our last one here, is the velocity of records from acquisition to customer. So this is really going to help answer the question of, do you know how long it takes on average from acquisition to customer? Are you able to see from the time you acquire someone to the time they become customer, what's that average length of time? How long does it take for a record to move through that buying cycle on average? These are key questions that you're going to want to start to answer so that if you're planning or forecasting how long your buying cycle is, you can help and start answering that. Or a lot of times you may be thinking, I already know my buying cycle. I can look at when an opportunity was created to close, but we want to focus on what happens prior to that. What happens to all those marketing touches that happen once the record is acquired prior to an opportunity being created. And this is the specific metric that's going to help you get there. So when we look at these top 8 revenue generating metrics, we really find that these are the most important, and they're important to your business, but we really think they're critical. So as we talked through all of those revenue generating metrics earlier, this is why it's crucial that you guys start reporting on them today. Let's start from the very bottom, calculated planning and budgeting. In the previous slides, we talked about how knowing which programs are sourcing those revenue generating records or knowing which programs are helping push records to a specific stage in your buying cycle, this is going to help you know where you want to focus on next year's planning and help with budgeting. At the end of the day, you want to know what's working and not working, and you want to plan accordingly. The second is understanding the buying cycle. We just talked about the conversion rates, velocity, and talking about where records may be getting stuck or where they maybe are converting to specific stages, and understanding how long it takes. Understanding your buying cycle is very important so you can understand how long it actually takes from someone to buy, and essentially how long it's taking them from acquisition to an opportunity stage. The next is measuring the ROI of marketing strategies. You want to measure what investments you're doing today and the impact it has on your business. That you can say, what should we focus on next year? And we can start measuring the ROI of those marketing strategies. The fourth one listed is adjust your current approach based on results. This may seem very simple, but without the results that you have and without the reports to explain those results and show you the trends, it's hard to adjust what you're doing today or plan for next year. But being able to say, here are the results, and know where you want to focus or where your team wants to focus, it makes things a lot easier, and you will start to see those results. Lastly, we want to prove marketing's impact on pipeline and revenue. We showed that those were our first two metrics at the very beginning of this because we want to prove the impact on the business. We want to show those dollars that marketing has had that impact. And we want to show that percent that marketing has helped influence. And that's really the most crucial part of all of this, but also understanding at the end of the day what's working and not working and being able to adjust where needed. It looks like Laura has a question from the audience. Laura?
Hey, yes, thank you. We have one here that would be perfect to just address right now. Kayla would like to know if she has to have RCE to get this type of reporting.
Thanks, Laura. So you don't need to specifically have RCE to report on these metrics that we just outlined, but you will, however, need to have an advanced reporting tool to do all of the reporting we outlined, specifically the attribution, in order to see marketing's contribution to pipeline and revenue. There are a lot of great reporting tools out there, so just make sure to choose the right one for your organization if you are looking for one. All right. We're going to continue to the next slide, which is what you should start tracking today in Marketo. So this is important when we look at those top 8 metrics that we just reviewed. A lot of what we like to do is analyze what are the first things or what are the essential things you need to do today. So the path to success often lies in the small things done daily within Marketo. So there's 4 highlighted areas that we want to review here. These are key things you should start tracking today as they are essential for reporting. But it's okay if you're not currently or maybe not consistently doing any of these on a regular basis. However, we just want to highlight them so that you can start identifying or adjusting your process so that we can start reporting. The first one is really defining your channels. So we want to lay the foundation for reporting, and those channels are really what helps us outline all your marketing tactics. Which leads us to the next one, which is defining your successes within your channels for proper reporting. So if you're tracking successes within each of your programs, the most important thing there is that we can start to report and see what is the most successful engagement. For example, a webinar. If you're attending, that is a success in our mind. That's what you have engaged in that specific program. And so we can look across all of those webinars to see where there was the most engagement. And then we can start making decisions or planning for next year, knowing what's worked and what hasn't worked. The third one is tracking how records are being acquired. So in the previous slides, we talked a lot about looking at how we're sourcing records to see if those records are moving on to an opportunity or becoming customers down the buying cycle. So we want to make sure that our lead sources are aligning to channels. But we also want to look at which of those programs, specifically the acquisition program, that those records were being acquired from. For example, a trade show. The trade show might be where we acquired someone, but we want to know which trade show, and that's going to be the program. Being able to identify where we're acquiring records and then be able to identify how those records are flowing through the buying cycle, and then being able to see if those records are then going on to become customers. The last one here is the most important when it comes to identifying those records who've engaged throughout that buying cycle, but then linking them to that opportunity and attaching that contact to the opportunity so that we can accurately give credit back to those programs and channels that those records had engagement in, so that we can say that that program has contributed to that opportunity or to that deal closing. That's really important. All four of these are really important whenever we start a reporting project. These are the first things that we identify and we assess, because without these, you could have limits to what you can report on today, or the results may not be as accurate. So we need to make sure some of these or all of these things that we've identified are done daily, or if you aren't consistently doing it today, let's start moving forward and getting them done in your Marketo. So as we talk about some of the things that you should start tracking today, as we talk about the things that we want to start reporting on, we're going to see some common roadblocks. And there's a lot of common roadblocks listed here. We're only going to cover top 4 so that we can really identify ones that we see most common. But as you can probably imagine, roadblocks, and you probably experience, roadblocks can limit reporting, and the results can be inaccurate or unreliable. So one of the most common ones is maybe you don't have a reporting tool today, but you want to start reporting on how marketing has impacted pipeline and revenue. So identifying that you don't have that reporting tool today, but then deciding, okay, what's the best tools that we need to start leveraging, and then we need to start reporting. The next one is the lack of system alignment. And this is important, and it's definitely one of our foundational items that you should first check when we're assessing any instance, is making sure systems align. Because if someone is reporting in one system and other results are coming from somewhere else and they're not aligning, then your data and metrics are unreliable. The next one, and we sort of talked about this in the previous slide, is not marking successes in programs. If you don't have a clearly defined successes in each of your Marketo channels, it's going to be hard to identify which programs have had the most engagement, so that you can focus on where you want to spend your time or what you want to continue working on, or even focus on those events next year. So not marking successes in programs, it's hard to understand the true engagement in those. And lastly, marketing and sales misalignment. So this is one that we see when we're looking at the full buying cycle. We want to make sure those marketing and sales are aligned, so that when we're looking at the metrics, we're able to identify maybe where there's gaps or where there's things that may need to change. And without having that alignment, it becomes a lot more difficult. So as you review these today, if you see a lot that you feel that you maybe are answering yes to, that's okay, because a lot of these things can be adjusted, and you can change and adjust those today. Some may take some extra work, but the thing is, even if you start doing the little things today, as we talked about in the previous slide, we can get to more of those reliable metrics and the top metrics that we want to start reporting on today. So overcoming roadblocks. As we just covered, there's a lot of roadblocks that you may identify. For example, one thing that we talked about was maybe not having an advanced reporting tool. So if we identify that you don't have that tool, we isolate the issue, we identify the key stakeholders, we understand what limitations we have from a reporting perspective. The next step would be communicate. Outline the current state, outline what we can't see today, what we can't report on today. Communicate those limitations
to the individuals that need to know, those key stakeholders, but also provide solutions and communicate those solutions. The third step is implement. Once you know which advanced reporting tool you want to leverage, you want to implement the solution. You want to create process and efficiency, but also you want to make sure that you're aligned with your goals, and if you need to sit down and define that strategy, that's also very important. The fourth is making sure that you're analyzing the data, and then you're communicating the results. One very important thing to note here is that you want to make sure that your results or the reports that you're pulling align with the overall objectives. But you also may want to report and create those metrics based on the audience that you're speaking to or you're presenting to. So if you want to provide marketing specific metrics, if you're presenting to sales, you may adjust the reports or the metrics that you're providing based off of what you're essentially wanting or who your audience is. So that's the 4 steps of once you've seen your roadblocks or you've identified those roadblocks, is how to overcome them. And again, all of these things, once you've identified them, is moving forward so you can get those metrics.
All right. Well, Kate, thank you so much. Let's see. Good. I think we're good. There's not an audio feedback there. Well, the next steps here is for each one of you on the audience today to put yourself in 2 buckets. Are you surviving or thriving? I hope that even if you would classify yourself in the surviving, you get into the mindset of getting into the thriving camp. We want you to get to the point where you're avoiding the guesswork. You've really got the tools within your command, and that you can start spending more and more of your time talking with your team and looking at the data and analysis and determining what you're going to do next, not trying to spend all your time just trying to get to the data to begin with. And so we're going to come full circle here before we talk about or answer questions and answers and talk about webinars number 2 and 3, is for all of you that are trying to take it up that next notch, the question is are you ready to start answering these key business criteria? And one by one, you should start to go through this and ask the question, do I know the top lead source? Do I know the top lead sources that are generating the pipeline versus the revenue? And what you're going to find is you might be surprised if you historically to date have just always felt you understood which channels worked. For example, events versus webinars versus pay per click or different types of tactics. Sometimes you'll be surprised at which ones are generating leads versus which ones are actually getting all the way into your pipeline and your revenue. So I encourage you to really be, to dive into these and not assume that you know what the answer is, and dive into it and prove that you know what the answer is. And so a dashboard like this is just one example. Many of you have dashboards that you've used in the past, but I would encourage you to make sure that you do have the data. And you know, one thing we've noticed in working with clients over the last 6-7 years is the actual end presentation of the material can look a lot different, but it's really how do you get the core piece of data like pipeline influenced by marketing, if we're looking at that top left part of the dashboard. As long as you can run reports and get that answer quickly, and it's not hours and hours of Excel manipulation to get the answer, it doesn't matter then what that gets transferred onto, whether it's a PowerPoint or some other internal board presentation metric, is that you can do that in minutes, transferring a number on, even if you're doing it weekly for an audience internally. The hard part is that you've got the systematic, repetitive method to get the answer quickly, and that you trust it, and that everybody you're working with, not only your marketing coworkers, but your sales colleagues, everybody along that chain is trusting the data and understands, and that it's been vetted, and that they do truly trust the data. And once you get there, you really are thriving, to be quite honest with you. That is the end game that we're all trying to get to as marketers. So with that, Laura, why don't we open it up for questions? And I know we've got a slide or two to close things out for what's coming and kind of the depth we're going to go into on the next two presentations. But let's open it up for some Q&A.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have some great questions, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first question I'll direct to you, Kate. If our marketing team hasn't been tracking in Marketo, as you noted in the slide, are we unable to do reporting moving forward?
No, so what we would recommend is tracking and structuring today, if you can, is making those adjustments that we talked about. The sooner the better is going to help you so you can get those metrics and start reporting and feel that your metrics are accurate as well. So those are things that if you haven't been doing or you're not consistently doing today, that's okay. They can be fixed or adjusted, but it's just important to note that those are things that maybe you should start going and looking back at your process and saying, hey, how can we fix this moving forward?
Excellent. Excellent. Great question. Kate, I'm going to give this next one to you as well. I know this is something many of us can relate to. How do you make these metrics understandable to the broader team outside of marketing?
That's a great question. So we get that question a lot. When we're looking at the reports, you may understand what they're trying to say, but then explaining it or simplifying the metrics to the broader team can be kind of a challenge. And so what we like to do is we look at the metrics and we simplify, but we first want to identify who's the audience. We want to make sure that our metrics that we're going to report on align to the audience we're presenting to, and then we want to simplify it and align it to those metrics or those goals that that team may be already reporting on, and then just essentially adjust them so that it's also making sense to them. But like the dashboard that we were showing you at the beginning, at the end of this webinar, that's the type of reporting or presentation that we would like to see or help our people identify, but really making it simple and then aligning it to the audience. That's really key.
Great. Andrew, this one's for you. Kate, you sort of touched on this, but Andrew, and the clients that you have worked with, what do you find that clients prefer or that you feel is the best approach to presenting these metrics outside of your team?
Yeah, so we've helped with a lot of our clients and actually prepare a lot of board level metrics for our clients, and so those are, for a lot of reasons, the most sensitive, as you can imagine, because this is going not only to senior management within client organizations, but also their board. Those presentations tend to be coming out of Marketo or Marketo and Salesforce, or if you're using a third-party reporting tool. Kate mentioned there are many fabulous ones on the market. We can always provide guidance and advice depending on what type of attribution reporting you're wanting to do. There's several solutions out there that have really looked at that problem well and quite honestly solve it very, very well. But what we found at the board level, it's rarely coming out directly out of one of those systems. The user of the system, meaning us as a marketing manager, director, CMO, we certainly want that flexibility, and we want to be able to drill in live time to dashboard data, right? So if we use Marketo's Revenue Cycle Explorer, for example, absolutely, as marketing operations and marketing executives, we want to be able to drill in and look at that next level of detail live time. But when it gets packaged up for external audiences, even sales, say the CFO, COO, it normally is getting transferred off into Excel or PowerPoint. I do not think there is anything wrong with that. I think sometimes it gets poo-pooed, or people look at it and say, oh, well, it didn't come directly out of the dashboard of the reporting solution. But most of that's just simply a consumption issue, to be honest with you, is that data and that consistent data, usually it's quarter over quarter reporting, is mixed in with a whole bunch of other operational aspects of the company, so it's not just marketing at that point. And that's what I usually guide clients on. As long as the actual numbers are trustworthy and the inference and the insight to what that means and the commentary about what those numbers mean, it really doesn't matter as much what the end tool is that is put into. It's the content that really makes a difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Well, those are the questions that we had today. I'd like to take just a moment and tell you about parts 2 and 3 that are coming up. You can see the dates there on your screen. We are going to dig deeper into these key metrics that Kate went over with you today. Many of you are already registered, and that's fabulous. But if you need the link, it's there on your screen. And we'll also get it out to you via email with the recording after today's session, so that if you're not registered yet, you can save your seat and definitely take advantage. We're going to do the deep dive. It's going to be incredible on these. And with that, we want to thank you for attending. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We hope that what we presented was helpful, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.